Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings podcast. I am here this time with Lucy Wright, artist and folklorist, and we're going to talk about dusking because I came across one of your posts about 2 weeks ago, Lucy, perhaps even less than that now, and you're going to tell us all about dusking because this is super exciting. It's something that I think a lot of watchers and listeners are going to really take into their hearts. So welcome, and I can't wait to hear what you have to impart to us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on. It's an absolute honor. Really grateful.
Oh, well, thanks for coming.
Okay, so yeah, it's a little bit of an involved story, but I hope I can sort of tell it with, to give it some justice. So it really is. It's only a year old. It's a very unexpected project for me, but basically it's a 100% invented tradition, invented mostly by me, with a bit of input from some other people who I'll mention. And the idea is it's acknowledging that it's become a sort of recognised kind of custom that on May morning, on May the 1st, Morris dancers get up at 5 a.m. or before 5 a.m. and they dance the sun up and they welcome the start of the summer. And it's a really beautiful thing. It's sort of become even more popular, I think, in more recent years. And my social media gets lit up on May morning with all these people going out to dance, and it's just beautiful. And it occurred to me last year that there isn't a comparable tradition to dance the sun back down again. Um, there's a slight proviso there in that I think some Morris sides do occasionally do it, and certainly in the Southern Hemisphere, because Morris dancing is
Mm.
pretty much a global thing in this day and age. I know some Southern Hemisphere sides do it because that's the way their kind of seasonality works. But on the whole, I would say that Morris dancing, the sundown again, is a much less well-known sort of tradition. And it also stems from a project that also began last year, which I call Hedge Morris Dancing. And this is my kind of term for Morris dancing that takes place outside of an established Morris dancing group or team. I used to Morris dance when I lived
Ah,
in Lancashire, and then when we moved to Yorkshire, it was increasingly difficult to find a side that was sort of travelable for me, that performed the same style that I like to perform
yeah,
and that admitted women. So there's quite a few kind
yeah.
of challenges there. And
Mm.
so on May morning came around, I still wanted to be involved in the Morris dancing the sun up. And so I just did it by myself. And I happened to be traveling for work. I was in Stevenage at the time, and Hedge Morris danced the sun up in the car park, the pay and display car park behind the Holiday Inn where I was staying. So not a very glamorous, beautiful spot. But I posted about it on social media and I called it Hedge Morris Dancing. With reference to a book called Hedge Witchcraft by Ray Beth. That prefix is quite interesting, I think. Has been used throughout history to refer to practices that are unofficial, unsanctioned. I think it was really a little bit of a derogatory term. I'm thinking so there were the hedge schools in 18th and 19th century Ireland, as you say, that were educating Catholic children when that kind of education was banned.
And
There were also hedge priests and hedge missionaries who were kind of teaching the gospel outside of an established church. And then there were clandestine hedge marriages for like one night only, which I think is really funny. And even Shakespeare actually talks about a hedge-born swain in contrast to someone of noble blood. So it was
oh
meant as
wow,
a bit of
yeah,
a bit of an insult. But actually, when
yeah.
you read about it with kind of contemporary mores, you kind of think, actually, this is quite progressive. This is quite cool.
Mm,
I kind of want to be a bit hedge. So that was
absolutely.
why the term sort of stuck.
It's great. And the thing about this is the idea is that you don't have to belong to a group. You don't have to be in some kind of organized situation. And as you say, this is also kind of bringing in people from the periphery who might not feel they have access in some way, whether it be because of physical disability, or because, because of gender, or, anything that might be a kind of hurdle for people to feel like they could become involved. So people can just do this in their own way, in their own time, in their own space. And, you don't even have to go outside. That's the great thing. You do it as you see fit, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was probably what sort of resonated with a lot of people when I started first talking about Hedge Morris dancing last year.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people, it turned out, who were really interested in the idea of Morris dancing, were kind of looking for ways to get involved in some of our kind of English seasonal customs, but felt that it wasn't for them for one reason or another. And as you say, disability and chronic illness is a big one. There's a huge amount of sort of ableism in a lot of the kind of folk
Yeah.
customs that a lot of us, kind of would recognise. Equally, people who, don't have their roots necessarily in the UK, or who come from elsewhere, and just don't feel that, maybe they wouldn't be welcome. And my hope is that people actually perhaps would be more welcome than they think they might be. And I've done a little bit of work to kind of explore ways that sort of different people have kind of interpreted Morris tradition so that it doesn't have to be this very white male monolithic
Mm.
entity. And we know there's some great groups like Boss Morris right now, and the
Mm.
Ward and Blackthorn Ritualistic, who are doing really exciting things with Morris. But yeah, I think the idea that not everybody is able to join a group, not everyone wants to join a group, and also that these traditions are very sort of flexible. Like, you can make them your own. You don't have to kind of follow a relatively rigid kind of
Mm.
model for how this should be done. You don't have to wear a particular costume. You can make something yourself. You can grab what you've got, to hand. You can,
Yeah.
and that was what was so lovely about Dusking last year. There were people who had taken a long, long time to make very beautiful, ornate costumes and do a fantastic kind of stage managed, choreographed performance. And then there were other people who stood in their kitchen with 2 tea towels and just waved them. And it was
Excellent.
just great.
Yeah.
Like, all contributions were
Yeah.
so valid and so lovely.
I love that. And I mean, so the idea is that, as you say, you have, May the first morning, you have Beltane, Beelzebub morning, where you have the kind of the coming of the summer, and then at the 31st of October, as you say, that's a good day to kind of pin this on. Really, it's very well known as Halloween, and and then you have Samhain. That as the sun goes down, people will mark that by being somewhere doing something that is meaningful to them. And it may take the form of a little dance with whatever they can put their hands on and whatever they want to wear at that time, or it might take some other form. But the idea then is that at 4:33, which is sunset in Britain anyway, in this time zone, on the 31st, that people will be marking that in some way, and I guess giving a nod to the sun going down as a kind of as a blessing, as a salute, as a way of marking that time of going into the darker months. So yeah, I mean, what are there any kind of bigger are there any kind of like big events planned around that, or anything that people can tap into as groups, that maybe online or in person, as well as
Yeah,
their
I
own
mean,
kind of thing?
so it's primarily quite a solitary thing. I always think back
Yeah.
to that Hedge witchcraft book from Ray Beth, who I've been really lucky enough to correspond with a little bit throughout this kind of project.
Yeah.
And she's in her, I believe, in her 80s or 90s now. But
Wow.
it has always promised that she'll be Hedge Morris dancing with us on these important dates in the calendar. But so the idea, I think, has always really been that perhaps it's something that you do by yourself or just with a few sort of closer friends. That said, this year, second year that we've done it, there's a few groups that have mentioned that they're going to do something together, not in a particularly formalised
Mm.
kind of ticketed sort of a way, but I think there's something going on in Sheffield. I'll be at Horse and Bamboo Theatre in Rossendale. We're going to have a very informal dusking party with a fire and some nice food and some music, hopefully, as well. But really, yeah, it is something that you can do wherever you happen to be in the world. That's sort of the aim, that you don't have to be anywhere special. It's lovely if you can get to somewhere beautiful to do this, but you can equally do it in your back garden or in your living room if
Yeah.
that's what you happen to be. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And if people feel like they want to kind of share what they're doing, would they send it to your perhaps your Instagram? And I'll put that here, your link to Instagram here. Is that the kind of thing that you might like people to do? Obviously, for some people, it will just be a private act, of connection that they want to keep to themselves. But for other people, they might want to share what they're doing and see what other people are doing. So that's always fun too.
Absolutely. I mean, and that was the joy of last Dusking last year.
Yeah,
I think 100 people shared, photographs, videos, or other contributions. I mean, you mentioned a second ago that you don't have to do a dance, and that is
yeah,
absolutely true. Like, I think I initially envisaged it as an opportunity for this kind of growing army of misfit Morris dancers that I seemed to be kind of amassing around me under this idea of Hedge Morris. I wanted them to have a tradition that they could take part in, but there were other people who just kind of got behind the idea, and so we also had songs and poems and stories and images. There are so many ways that people, even a theatre production of some kind, sort of drew on Dusking. So
wow,
it really is, it's an open invitation to, as you say, take a moment to reflect on, I guess, the equal blessings and kind of gifts of the darker months. I think, like many people, I've always found the winter slightly harder to welcome than the
okay,
summer. Like, I feel like May the 1st is a time, it's quite easy to feel hopeful and joyful at that
mm,
time, knowing that the days are going to get longer. The darker half of the year is pretty tough for a lot of people, for lots of
right,
different reasons. But there are these fantastic gifts, and I've drawn a lot on a book by Catherine May called Wintering. I don't know,
mm,
maybe some of your listeners are going to be familiar with that, but if they're
yeah,
not, do get a copy. It's a
yeah,
great book, and she speaks a lot about how winter is not only a kind of seasonal actuality, but it's something that we can kind of experience in our own bodies, in our own selves, in our own lives, and it's important that we don't just always rush to try and get the light back in, but actually kind of, yeah, trust the darkness, to actually kind of sit with that and welcome it, and the rest and replenishment and yeah, and restoration that time can offer. So yeah, in
yeah.
answer to your question, which I appreciate, I've gone off track a little bit.
No, no, not at all.
People are so welcome to join in. It has been primarily an online thing. People share stuff usually on Instagram. We've got the hashtag Dusking or
Okay.
Dusking24 if you want. And my Instagram, because it's such a grassroots, such a new tradition, I guess. It's still very small and very kind of located in my in my little channel, which is very small
Mm,
as well. But everything that comes in, I share, so that there will be a kind of repository made as well. So Trad Folk, the online folk music magazine, last year did a fantastic
right.
roundup of lots of the performances. We'll be doing that again this year with any luck. And yeah, it was such a lovely, supportive thing. People were really like sharing and enjoying watching all of the different performances and contributions that came in. So it was genuinely a very affirming, lovely thing. And hopefully, yeah, anyone is invited to join us this year.
Well, I was very excited to see it because I feel I don't think it's any sort of coincidence that it's kind of arisen now, and thankfully you have been open enough to kind of to take that idea and run with it and to introduce this to people. And the reason I say that is because so in a lot of the episodes that we've been exploring lately as part of this project, we've been looking at the kind of darker side of things, the dark man, for instance, and his aspects. And there's this sense of that as a global society, certainly in Western culture anyway, in the last sort of 300 years or so, we're very much focused on the kind of light, and anything that is dark. I mean, throughout history, you could say anything that is dark is seen to be, push it away, don't look at it, you have to bear it. And actually, what is really beautiful about this, and I read your excellent piece, and I think it was, so this was from the Terry Pratchett's The Character. Tiffany Aching ends up joining this kind of dark Morris group, and she questions why would people dance, for the dark sun, for the dying months, or the dark months. And her teacher says they welcome the winter because of the new summer deep inside it. And that is just so powerful. And it's absolutely spot on, because within the darkness, every time without fail, there is this light that's about to return. And of course, we see that when we get to winter solstice, of course, in the deep darkness, the sun begins to return. And I think for me, I actually love this time of year, I have to say. But when we've got to that point, or for these months while we're reaching it, these are the months where, rather than being outside with all our friends and having the barbecues or whatever and going on holidays and just being outwardly celebratory of life, the kind of opposite happens, where we start to slow down, we go inside, and this is where we actually come face to face with our own suffering, how the year has been, the meaning of life. We kind of really go deep down in those months, and we're preparing to see family at Christmas, and that can always hold difficulties for people, sad memories, sad times, difficult relationships. It gets very deep, and we are forced to kind of look at the darkness within us, and then we have the light appearing within all of that, and that might actually be the same things. That might be the Christmas that we spend with our family, and it might be those bittersweet memories that we are, that we're given cause to remember. And then, of course, there's this, we're on the way to the new life again when the sun returns, in springtime. So it is an extremely powerful time of year. We do not give it the, the attention or sense of validity or value, I should say, that we give to the lighter months and then the ceremonies and rituals that we have at that time of year. So I feel like you, as I say, bringing it into our consciousness now is yeah, I feel like it is very fitting, and this is why I feel like I want to share this with everybody watching, and ask viewers to please go and share it with those friends that they feel would be excited about this too, because I suspect it's kind of bubbling up in all of us. That's what it kind of feels like to me. Have you noticed that it's kind of garnering like that?
I really, really hope so. I mean, it's been a lovely response so far, from my own small community, and people are really excited for it. Um, like I say, I think there's a kind of there's two camps. There are those who have been spending weekends kind of building these incredible, beautiful costumes, and others who are really using it as more
Mm,
of, I guess, sort of a very personal thing, a very kind of meditative, a much more solitary, quiet type activity, and I really love that. um yeah, and I agree completely. It's really easy to celebrate the summer months. It's really easy to celebrate the lightness, but I think it's much harder to sit face to face with darker things. And I don't want to be maudlin. It's not in my character particularly.
okay.
It's not about kind of a sort of, I don't know, like an emo take on life, but yeah, our theme this year is trust the darkness, and it's an optional theme. You don't have to kind of respond to that, but I really liked it. It actually came from another
Yeah.
book. A lot of my stuff is drawn
Okay.
from books, but The Artist's Way,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
I've got down here by Julia Cameron, and
Wonderful.
she's talking about it as as this necessary part of the
Yeah.
artistic process, and I really relate to it because
Yeah,
I
me
think we
too.
feel, particularly in this kind of capitalist world we live in, to
Mm,
be very productive all the time, to be always on, to be always busy, to be always sort of visibly, performatively, thriving and striving. And
yeah.
but actually, to produce beautiful stuff, we have to be in spaces of darkness and confusion and uncertainty. We have to be okay with that. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking of it a little bit like, the seeds under the soil, that they have to be in darkness in order to bloom into something beautiful above the surface. But you can't rush
Yeah.
it. You can't just have the flower above the surface without seed in the soil, and
Mm,
allowing ourselves, the kind of, we accept it in nature, I guess, but sometimes we're less forgiving of ourselves. And so allowing ourselves to rest and to allow these kind of processes to take place, and until we feel ready to come out again above the surface.
completely. Thank you for saying that. And I think that that is a lot of what your work is about, isn't it? Because it is obviously folklore. As we met at the we were just trying to figure it out before. We met at probably the 2016 or 17 newer researchers gathering of the Folklore Society.
Do you
And
think we still count as newer researchers, Joe? Like, it's
oh,
nearly 10 years ago.
well, I still have no idea what I'm doing. So yeah, I think I'd still count myself as a new
Fair.
researcher. Um, but yeah, I think that we've seen the huge interest gathering in folklore, both at that time and before, and certainly in the years following. And people feel it in their bones. They want that. They want to return to those meaningful rituals that mark the cycles of the year. They want to return to the land, particularly after lockdown, which you have noted was a big shift as well, and I have too. It was certainly a big shift for people, that sense of, oh my goodness, I really need nature, and what nature can bring us. And so, a lot of your work, as you have showed in your writing, and your exhibitions, is that we are reclaiming folklore, we are reclaiming traditions, we are making new ones, which is just as important and valuable as the old ones, because we're doing it for the same reasons. It's a need, it's innate, it's within us. And what's great, as I say, about what you're doing is, a lot of this, it's kind of a sense of as a sort of resistance and protest as well. Folklore really ties into that. It's a great way of, because we are DIYing it and exploring for ourselves. I think that is very much against the grain, and therefore it is extremely important in this time of great transition. So all of these things kind of tie into, a sense of need within us as communities and individuals now, particularly at this time in the world. So thanks very much for what you're doing. And you've got an exhibition on at the moment, haven't you?
I do. It's only for another few days now. I believe it closes on the 3rd of November, so just after Dusking. But yeah, I have an
Right.
exhibition called Future Folk Archetypes, and it's at the Portico Library in Manchester. And if people are not familiar with the Portico, it's almost a kind of dream, dark academic location. It's all kind of neoclassical columns, floor to ceiling books. It's a kind of Victorian institution, and they have a small collection of folklore books, but they invited me to come in earlier in the year to kind of reinterpret that collection a little bit, or to maybe start to look at some of the gaps in it and the people and communities that are excluded from that kind of canon of folklore. And I think what you were saying just now about the kind of protest, the sort of resistance within folklore, I think, yeah, I'm aware that the canon that I grew up with around, I guess, particularly folk music and dance, but also seasonal customs and things, it's relatively arbitrary. It's not the full picture,
Yeah.
and it doesn't really account very well for the way that these traditions change, that they have to change in order to stay relevant for the communities who practice them, and for the new communities who are here, with us now, and joining. So I think that it's a really important time to look at those gaps, to if you know, to celebrate the people whose voices have been excluded, I guess, from those collections for a long time, and also, where there don't exist, suitable customs that speak to us in the present day, to create them ourselves, and to feel empowered to do that, because that's what always used to happen. It was only at a certain point that we decided folklore needed to be fixed in time.
Mm, mm.
It had always changed, and it always will need to
Always
do
will.
so. I love to see the new interpretations of some of these older materials, and the ones that are completely, out of the air, because, yeah, as you say, it's something that we all need. And I feel like in a increasingly secular society, we often lack those rites of passage, those contexts
Yeah,
for kind of
definitely.
celebrating different aspects of life, and marking the passage of time. And I think folk customs of all kinds can be a really great space to tap back into that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I'm gonna do this in any way that I can. I am with a group that day, and so I'm going to try and get them on board. But even if they don't, I'll just skip into the kitchen where we are and just do it myself. And yeah, it'd be great if people can share what they're doing if they feel like doing that. And where can people contact you and find out more about this project?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is no website. It really is just my Instagram at the moment. So
Yeah,
I'm Lucy Wright. My
great,
Instagram is at Lucy_J_Wright. If you wanted to have a look at my work more broadly, I have a website which is also www.lucywright.art. And I have
great.
quite a lot of stuff on there about Hedge Morris dancing, about Dusking, and also about these kind of lesser known traditions that I've spent at least the last 10 years kind of looking into and trying to kind of
Mm.
advocate a little bit for. So, and I'm always like delighted to hear from anybody who is interested or wants to sort of know a bit more. So in terms of like the participation, like I say, you're very welcome to join in whatever way feels right for you in the moment. But if you're interested in giving a bit of Hedge Morris dancing a go, my Instagram has quite a lot of little mini tutorials, little,
Great.
classes and lessons, hacks and workshops, etc. If you wanted to just, have a look at what we've been up to so far, but also make it your own, do it however you feel like. We had people pogoing and voguing and moshing and pole dancing at Dusking last year, so it does not have
Nice.
to be only Morris flavoured. But
Love it. I love the sound of that. And if people want to learn more about Dusking in particular, you have written this piece, which is available via a link on your link tree on Instagram. That's a really easy way to get to that too. So great. And yeah, I look forward to seeing all the pictures and and seeing how things work out on the other side. So
yeah,
yeah, enjoy it, everybody. And thanks, Lucy, for coming along and telling us about Dusking
thanks so much for having me.
as
It's been
well.
great.